Hi everyone, this is the long-awaited video looking at some of the trades that I do and kind of the logic and the reasoning behind it. There were some comments that asked for it. So anyway, I'm going to give it a shot and let me know if there's anything I can change. It's going to be very crude, as you can probably expect from my other videos. If I start getting more views and can actually justify the cost of it, from getting something off YouTube and seeking alpha, then I will spruce these up a bit. But in the meantime, this will get the job done. So just let me know if there's anything that I can change on it or if there's any additional details that I need to add. So these trades concern NextEra Energy, ticker symbol is NEE. The trade dates for these were on May 3rd and then again on May 13th, so pretty darn recent. My goal would be to actually make it so that if I make trades during that day, that I would post a video that night. And again, it's my goal. Whether or not it's going to happen is a different story with the way my life is right now. But then there's also an open limit trade, which is kind of a more actionable item. 20 shares right now are open at $85 a share, and I'll kind of provide some insight as to why that's the case. So first thing I want to look at is that I focus a lot. So we have to start with the premise that you have to believe that NEE is a good company. So NextEra needs to be a company that's worth investing in. And the thing about the yield, though, is that when the yield is high, is when the stock is undervalued. When the yield is low, that's when the stock is actually potentially overvalued, or at least a higher likelihood of being overvalued. So one of the things that you can see here is that right now it's at 3.01%. It's actually gone down a little bit since then, because I think the stock price went up since this screenshot was taken. But the idea being that a significant amount of the time NextEra has a yield that is less than what we currently see today. So that means that there's room to run with the stock, because potentially there's a higher stock price associated with it, or that should be, and that's what drives that yield lower. However, in this case, I would say that based on kind of the more recent trading history, but also when we look at the where the yields are currently, that's going to play a factor into this, right? It's not just that we're in a really low interest rate environment where a 2% yield is looking pretty attractive. But one of the advantages with NextEra is the fact that they have a high dividend growth rate. So anyway, this is just kind of an idea of where it's been historically. So this would have been prior to COVID, with interest rates getting dropped, but then also we have the interest rate increases, and then some kind of not disappointing but less than stellar results from NextEra. So here's the trades that took place. So what we did was on May 3rd, we sold 15 shares at $70 a share. And then May 13th, we sold 20 shares at $74.25 a share. And when you look at this, the cost basis, or the realized gains on it, we took a slight loss here, and most of this is because you never know how much a stock is going to run. So the idea being that if you're going to sell in tranches, and a tranche, for those who aren't familiar with the term, literally just means to sell certain number of shares at a certain limit. Okay, and what's interesting about these two trades is that this one was a limit trade that I set at $70. This was not a limit trade that I happened to just make because I opened up Charles Schwab, saw where things were at that day, and felt comfortable with where things were. That wasn't even a limit trade that was set, so it wasn't like I chose $74.25, whereas I did choose $70 previously. Okay, and so for the way that we justify it is that we say, okay, for the $52 loss that's going to be taken, it was worth getting these 15 shares sold, because these 15 shares represented the highest cost basis shares in the portfolio. And I'll get into that and show some screenshots. But then when we got into these 20 shares, we said actually these ones represent the next highest cost basis, but this cost basis was actually, or the sale price was higher than what the cost basis was, but just by slightly. And then now you see an open trade for 20 at $85 a share, and you might be wondering, $85, a pretty big jump from here. And part of this is that now we actually have a core position with NextEra Energy that we're not that interested in trading. The only reason why we would be willing to trade is because the stock price reaches a level that we do not believe has the ability to run any higher, or is where the cost or the benefit associated with the stock price running up is no longer likely. And in this case, if you guys look at NextEra Energy, however you guys like to pull it up, whether it be through your trading platform or Seeking Alpha is what I like to use. But if you go back and look at the 10-year history here and look at the stock price, only a few times did it ever reach $85 a share. So basically what I'm doing here with this trade is just saying, you know, if it happened to hit $85 a share, which is something that is very unlikely to happen, at least in the short term, then, you know what, go ahead and sell 20 shares, because then the benefit of selling those shares would be significant enough to justify it. But there's no reason for us to continue selling off shares when now we actually have a really good cost basis, and I'll show you a comparison of what that looks like. So the other thing here is that you can see these are all the trades that are associated with NextEra Energy. So we've been trading in and out of this position for quite a while now, going back to 2022. But the thing is that we make those trades with intent. And you can see that in most cases, we're selling off shares in a way that really isn't actually making any money. But what we were doing is we were reducing the cost basis, because if we were selling off these shares and only making 75 cents on 10 shares at $76.39, that tells you that the cost basis of those 10 shares was just under $76.39, right? So the idea being that we have traded these at these higher prices, and then you can see previously here where it got up to $85 a share and decided to sell 45 shares at that time, because we were able to log a fairly sizable gain associated with that specific piece of the position. So so in this case, rare circumstance, we actually sold this. Again, you can see the large gain here. But in most cases, you can see that we're really just trimming back those high cost shares and then buying shares as the stock price goes down. And like I previously mentioned, you have to go into this with the premise that for us, we believe that there is a value proposition that NextEra Energy offers, okay? If you're looking at a stock, you cannot just look at any given stock and then choose to make these kind of decisions with it. There needs to be more research done on that, and that's something I can get into in another video if you guys are interested. So here what you can see is that open limit trade that we have, I just wanted to mark this is the reason why I chose 20 shares and set that at $85 a share, because now we have a cost basis of $72.07. But what you can see is this cost basis as time has gone on, because these are some of the oldest shares that were purchased as time went on, going back to October of 2023, when we were able to purchase NextEra at the lowest levels that it's been in quite some time. As a result of purchasing these shares is also part of the reason why we're selling these shares here, okay? But you can see that now we're sitting at a fairly reasonable, gain on this entire position. But this happens to be this and this happen to be the two lowest, not lowest, but the two highest cost basis pieces. So on here, these are the original positions that were purchased. So basically from March of 2021 to January of 2022, bunch of shares were bought with NextEra Energy. And again, you can see the cost basis associated with each of those. So those 115 shares, the average cost worked out to be $73.62. Now, this is what our cost basis, the lot details, looks like here. And so we're able to take the 125 shares that are here divided by the total cost basis, and that gets us to $66.18 a share. So that's kind of the idea behind this, going from the $73 a share. Let me go previous. I was going to go to the previous slide. Yeah, $73.62 per share to now being at the $66.18 a share. And in addition to that, that's while also having logged, a gain of $555.82 on the sales that have been made since we've been trading in and out of this position. So hopefully that adds a little bit more detail. Like I said, it's you have to start with the value proposition of this has to be a stock that is worth trading in and out of. Again, please do not take this as you can just replicate this on any given stock and make a bunch of money. But also you'll notice too, and I think probably one of the other most important details I should mention, is that this is a long game. This is not something that you get people that'll day trade in and out of stocks. And that's not something that I'm interested in doing. This is something where we are establishing a long-term position, and we are basically taking advantage of the market when the stock price is down due to, maybe it's down to earnings, maybe it's because yields have gone up, but there has to be something that causes the stock price to go down that isn't an event, scandal in the company or something like that. You don't want to be trading based on situations like that. But when you're reducing the cost basis here, the benefit is that you are basically maximizing the money that you have invested to gain a yield that is higher than the yield that you would have had you done nothing at all. So it's not to make big gains like you see on this one right here. This is the icing on the cake. So those 20 shares that we currently have set for an $85 limit trade, that is icing on the cake if it gets there. But the icing on the cake only comes into play when the stock price reaches a point where you say the chances of any possible further upside is so remotely limited that it's just not worth holding on to the shares beyond that point. And I don't provide investing advice. I'm literally just showing everyone what it is that I do. But it's something that I don't do this with every stock that's in John and Jane's retirement portfolio. And I would not recommend anyone consider doing anything like that for more than what they can handle, and without having first established a good track record. Again, you can see with NextEra Energy, this is not something that I just decided to do last night or a month ago or 3 months ago. This has been something that's been going on for closing in on 4 years. So anyway, I just really want to drive that point home. Not a financial advisor, not telling people to trade in and out of stocks, because that's not what I do. But it's something where you can maximize your value, because the other piece too is that if NextEra Energy was to, for some reason the stock price was to take a tumble again, the benefit here is that you could establish that lower cost basis which means that it actually gives you more room to be able to sell out of shares in the event that you saw further downside, to where you then want to maximize the benefit that you could get by buying shares at a lower price. So say if news came out, earnings report was bad, delays in like their projects that they have, anything like that, maybe even the economy, people's utility bills going up and they're defaulting, and the collections like receivables are going up. Again, you have to really have a stock that's worth paying attention to and that you believe in. But when those kind of things happen, that's when you can actually say, okay, now that I have a lower cost basis to work with, like this, I'm able to actually sell out of these shares, giving myself a little bit more room to work with. If I believe that further downside is warranted. So in the same way that you can sell shares at $85 a share, and go, yeah, I don't believe there's any further possible upside that's going to be available. You can also set yourself up so that you can trim back these positions without taking too much of a loss, or even maybe potentially making a small gain on it, because you're saying that the chance or likelihood of downside in the share price is so much higher that it's not worth holding on to those shares anymore. So that's just another way to think about it. But let me know if you have questions in the comments. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to explain this a little bit more clearly. Give me some slack. It's the first time doing this, and it's kind of a deeper topic than a lot of people like to get into. So thanks, everyone. Have a great night.